Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, viewers worldwide, welcome to this week's special edition of Vinyl Countdown. My name's Dan Harding. I'm Head of Music Performance here at the University of Kent. And this is for anyone who hasn't seen it before, this is our weekly web show in which we invite a group of panellists into the virtual studio here to compete live on air for your votes in support of their nominated album. Each of our panellists has chosen an album that's important to them, and they will have a brief moment in Speaker's Corner to share with you their enthusiasm in the hope that they might persuade you to vote, so that by the end of the show, in about 45 minutes' time, we can crown one of our guests' nominated albums as this week's winner album of the week. And whichever platform you're watching on, be it YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, the voting system is dead simple. You simply put it in a comment, and then we will be able to find that comment and bring it up. And my colleague Sophie will be tallying the scores on the doors in the hope that at the end of the episode, we can declare one of our guest choices as this week's winner. So do get involved as well if you're watching along. By all means, comment along if you've been listening to this week's nominations as part of our listening list to get your reactions and so on. So without further ado, let me begin by welcoming each of our guests into the studio in turn. And there's a lovely alumni element to this week as well. I'm very pleased to be able to invite three former students here at the university who survived unscathed, or hopefully unscathed, the experience of being here at Kent, and have lived to tell the tale and are back this week. So first into the studio is Sarah. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, Dan.
Nice to see you. How's life with you?
It's very good, thanks.
Good. And you're broadcasting all the way from Lincoln.
Yes, yeah, Lincolnshire, as opposed to Lincoln anywhere else.
Lincolnshire, yeah. I mean, such is the geographical reach of this show that we are, increasing the miles every single week. So it's nice to see you. Thanks very much for coming.
Pleasure.
And also into the studio, competing for your votes this week, is Jo. Welcome, Jo.
Hi, Dan.
Nice to see you. How's life with you?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Not that you're trying to sort of, sway the viewers with your musicianship by having a grand piano clearly open behind you.
No, but I can't play it, so.
And Sarah was showing her upright piano similarly. So.
Oh yes, very good.
I've only got a digital one behind me, so we won't mention that, or your acoustic. Brilliant. And Jo, you're coming all the way from Bishopsbourne, is that right?
Yes, Bishopsbourne, rural Kent. Yes, absolutely.
Lovely. Brilliant. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we also have two of our current students joining us in the panel this week. For the first time into the studio, please welcome Edie. Edie, welcome.
Hi there.
Nice to see you. So you've remind me what it is that you study.
I study film, so I'm doing my third year now, finishing up.
Brilliant. And you've heroically given up your lunch hour in order to come into the virtual studio and enthuse about your favourite show.
Yes. I hope you're ready for me to talk your ear off about it.
Fantastic. Well, many thanks for joining us and for allowing us to prize you away from your studies just for an hour.
That's all right.
And making a triumphant return to the studio, having been a winner on a previous week's show, I think, if I remember correctly. Please welcome Carmen. Carmen, hello.
Hi everyone.
So you've done a couple of these now. So you did win one week, didn't you?
I did indeed. Yep, Lady Gaga, the Fame Monster. That's right. Fabulous album. Anyway.
Excellent. So you're here.
I do not have a piano behind me. I've got a ukulele. Good. So with my musical prowess with my ukulele. There you go.
Yeah. I feel this has descended into a sort of, show and tell musical instrument session. So anyway, nice to see you, Carmen. Thanks for coming. And finally into the studio, not competing for your votes, but sharing her encyclopedic knowledge and her pop punditry with us, but also here wearing her university alumna hat and a contemporary at Kent here with Jo and Sarah, my colleague Sophie.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And there is also a chamber choir link. Is that right? You were all or are all in chamber choir. Is that right?
Yeah. And we're all in orchestra together as well.
Good Lord. So clearly not too scarred by your musical experiences here at Kent. That's
Well, not that I can tell.
That was going to be really reassuring until that moment. So yeah, thanks very much. So without further ado then, let's crack on. And Sarah, let's invite you into Speaker's Corner. So you have the virtual floor. So this is your opportunity to tell us and to tell the viewers at home the album that you've chosen and why you've chosen it.
Okay. Well, Frank Sinatra's Songs for Swinging Lovers seems a very apt album to choose, considering that I really started my love affair with Frank Sinatra way back when I was probably just before I started at Kent. And when I turned up with my little CD player and my tiny little box of CDs, because that was in the days before streaming, I was, I've never been trendy, so I've got my little Frank Sinatra albums with me. And it was at the end of, after I finished my finals, this is in 1992, that I was able to go up to London and see Frank Sinatra in concert at the Royal Albert Hall. And it was the last time he performed in the UK. And so it seems very pertinent and relevant that this should be my choice to come back to UKC and kind of propose this album for your vote. It's a piece of absolute perfection. It's a quartet of when things just happen and they all come together at the right time and everybody is at the top of their game. This is the album. So if you can imagine, it's 1956. Frank has been recording with Nelson Riddle, who's the greatest arranger for big bands that I think I've ever heard. And they are recording in Capitol Studios Auditorium, which is more like a theatrical space. So the band are on the stage. Frank is down slightly lower in the audience bit. He has a huge entourage there. People say that the sessions, which actually only really happened over about 4 days, were usually well attended. So there was a slight concert element of him sort of showing his prowess to this assembled company, and often very great influential people came. You had the Great American Songbook, so you had songs by Jimmy Van Heusen, Cole Porter, Gershwin, Harry Warren, Johnny Mercer. Again, lyrics, fantastic lyrics, really, really top-notch, interesting, clever lyrics. And you've got a technical setup, which, to be honest, these days, you could probably get a better sound on your phone if you would set it to record, because it was recorded in mono. Stereo hadn't been created, and the people in the sound booth didn't have a massive amount of levers to pull to make the sound right. So it was incumbent upon the arranger and on the orchestra and on the singer to make sure that what they were doing was absolutely right. And I feel slightly out of place because the other albums that are being presented today are musicals, which I can also talk about. But this was really conceived and recorded as an album, so it wasn't there to entertain in any other way than to be listened to and danced to and sung to. It's what probably is the first sort of concept album going, because Frank started to record albums that were based around a theme, and his previous album, Songs for in the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, is a very dark album. It's about love lost. It was recorded at a time when he'd just broken up with Ava Gardner, who is renowned, is well held to be the love of his life. And this time around, it was an album about love, about being in love, staying in love, and all the joy that love brings. And it is the most joyous album. Probably the most famous of all the tracks on it, which came to be, it's actually the start of the B-side, because of course in those days you had to flip an album to get the other lot of tracks. So it starts off on side A with You Make Me Feel So Young, which is a great Frank standard, and on the B-side it starts off with I've Got You Under My Skin, which is probably one of his best ever songs. And the combination of the Nelson Riddle orchestration, which apparently he wrote in the car on the way to the recording session, he plus Frank's just sublime vocals on this, and studio musicians who are at the apex of their game. It took 22 takes to get this, and Frank, they didn't believe in kind of splicing or putting stuff together. He wanted a song that was presented as a song and recorded as a song, and so they 22. Now some of those takes would have been a false start or something that wasn't quite right recording wise, but that poor trombonist that builds and builds and builds and builds, you get to this most amazing instrumental solo with this trombonist who's probably on about take 12 at this point, and he blasts it out. Probably no lick left. By the end of this session, his lick would have been the size of an apple, and then Frank comes in and just finishes it and smashes it out of the park. And it's his most incredible piece of recording. And I think that, well, I love it. It makes me smile. Every time I hear it, it doesn't fail to cheer me up.
Fantastic. And clearly, so you've already got a convert. It sounds as though Carmen hasn't managed to quite persuade her family to vote in her favour this week.
Well, I've not spoken yet.
Lucy, thank you for watching, and yes, don't allow Carmen to dissuade you if actually Sarah has persuaded you that the Frank Sinatra, which is a wonderfully, I mean, you're right, Sarah, it is a wonderfully sunny, feel good. It's like, for me, listening to it was like hugging, being hugged by a warm blanket or something. There's something wonderfully warm and connected about it. It's such a terrific album. It was a great one to listen to this week. So thank you very much. That was Sarah persuading you to vote for Frank Sinatra. So next into our Speaker's Corner then, Jo, let's bring you. So again, you have the floor. So tell us and the viewers at home what you've chosen and why you've chosen it.
Okay, well, to be honest, I love that Frank Sinatra album as well. So
you go talk to me.
I had it when I was a teenager, like Sarah, and I've listened to it. I know it off by heart. I love it. So if that wins, then I'm happy. But,
End of show.
I'm going to speak about this, which is Chess, the musical. I saw the original production and the original cast in London when I was at school on a school trip, and I absolutely loved it. At the time, musicals were big and loud and overblown with massively complicated productions and sets and effects. And I'm not actually sure whether that worked to Chess's advantage, because it was very overblown as a show. But actually, it's really interesting to consider the music that was at the time. And at the time, I was really excited because it was a collaboration between ABBA, or at least Benny and Bjorn from ABBA, and Tim Rice, who'd been very successful as the lyricist in Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita, Andrew Lloyd Webber. And in the 70s, when I was a child, my mum and I loved ABBA. We both loved musicals. So the mixture of musicals and ABBA was just, it was too exciting for words. The other thing that why I wanted to use it as a suggestion now is that it was actually a concept album of a show that was produced before the show was produced. And this doesn't really happen now, but back in the day, composers and lyricists used to get an album together. They used to produce the album, get it as best as they possibly could, and then sell the album and sometimes a concert tour. And then they would use that to get the money and the publicity for the original production. And that's exactly what it happened here. So this recording was 1984, and the first London production was 1986. There have been various productions since then. The next production was the Broadway one, which was this widely known. Dan can hear some echo. I don't know what to do about that. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Don't worry. Keep going, Jo.
So so the next production was the Broadway production, which actually was not a great success, and it actually closed. It was a success in London, but it was not a success on Broadway. And since then, there have been various productions, not really a definitive production ever. I saw a concert version in 2008 at the Albert Hall, starring Josh Groban, who's actually in Edie's recording. And that was great, but it wasn't a production, it was a concert production. So I suppose one of the things that intrigues me about chess is that I don't think there's ever been a definitive production of it. Tim Rice at the time was thinking of writing a political musical, and chess in the 80s was a big deal. The World Championships, the Americans against the Russians against the Russians. It was a big deal in the 1980s, and particularly with the Cold War and the kind of East-West relations that it also covers. The show's really, the story's too complicated for me to sort of quickly tell you about. And I think really that was part of its problem, in that Tim Rice says now, because I've been listening to his podcast, excellent Tim Rice podcast for anybody who's interested. It's called Get Onto My Cloud. But he says that he prefers chess to have surtitles so that people actually know more about the story, because it's sung through and the lyrics are very busy and there's a lot of story to tell. I think that's a bit of a downside of chess, and that if you don't have the surtitles, you might not have a clue what's going on. But on the plus side, the songs, some of the songs are just brilliant. There are fantastic duets, the Mountain Duet in particular. There are loads of lovely solos. There's some great sort of pop ballads. One Night in Bangkok is fun. That was the biggest international hit from the show. Obviously, I Know Him So Well was the biggest hit here in the UK, because that went to #1 here. Heaven Help My Heart was originally going to be an ABBA release, and then they didn't release it for ABBA, and they actually put it in chess. So there's lots of really, really good numbers, but the slight downside is some of the other numbers that aren't the big pop ballads, I think, are a little bit pastiche. Some are a bit operetta, some are just a bit too much exposition, in my opinion, and not enough melody. So really, to conclude, I'm not sure whether this is a great album, actually. I love it. It means a lot to me. And I've always liked chess, and I'm always intrigued if I ever hear that somebody's going to put it on, amateur or professional. I always think, oh, I wonder what that's going to be like. And it is a great example of an 80s musical. It has some fabulous music by the two guys from ABBA. And I think it's intriguing, because I think that probably the definitive production of it is still to come.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jo. So there's Jo hoping to persuade you to vote for chess. I mean, yes, you're right. It is product placement. There it is. The actual album too. But I mean, yes, you're right. It's got some really sort of cracking songs, and you're right about the pastiche. It struck me, listening to it recently, that the model of decorum and tranquility, that very kind of mock classical waltz, isn't it? Very, very pastiche is exactly the right term. I was thinking, that sounds like it was, written in parody of something, and of course that's what it is. So, but yes, I mean, it's got some wonderfully diverse sort of stylistic things to it. Some of it's very rocky, some of it, some lovely duets and some lovely ballads and so on. So it is a fascinating monster, and I like the idea that as you say, that the definitive production may yet to be attained. So there's a challenge to anyone out there who is looking for a production to beat everything. So thank you, Jo, persuading you hopefully to vote for chess. So let's move on to Carmen, because Carmen, I'm mindful, as you said earlier, that you have to go at 1:45, don't you? Because yes, being the diligent student that you are, you've got to come onto campus for a COVID test before you go to a seminar.
Mm-hmm. Yep, stick something up my nose, swirl it about. It's a great time. What a world we live in. Anyway.
So being very, very, very kind of, mindful and responsible. So well done to you. And obviously, people aren't voting yet, so it wasn't in the bag.
I do love chess though as well. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, Carmen, you have the virtual floor. So, tell us what you've chosen and why you've chosen it.
So, I picked The Light Princess, which is a relatively new musical. It was written by Tori Amos with lyrics by Samuel Adamson. Right, The Light Princess, because I don't think it's one that people don't know unless they're really nerdy about music or happen to see it when it had its limited run at the National Theatre. Okay, so it was in 2013 in December. My gran always likes buying us theatre tickets to go see things, and she's like signed up to the National Theatre, and so she got us in that. I'd never heard of it, and I hadn't really heard of Tori Amos particularly, and yeah, so we went to see it, and I absolutely adored it. I thought it was so good. I had such a great time with the musical. It follows a princess who, her mother dies when she's young, and she becomes so light with grief that she starts to float, and it's sort of that's the Light Princess, and then it's a fairy tale kind of thing, which is really nice. And yeah, and then I saw it in December of 2013, and then my birthday happens to be in January of 2014, and it had that limited run, so we raced straight back to the National in January 2014 to watch it again with some of my friends. And then what happened after that? Then there wasn't a cast album out for it until 2015, and I remember being in a Facebook group with people being like, we want the cast album for The Light Princess, and then that finally came out, and it came with my signed poster and the CD, and I just love it, and it's like my little like nerdy. I like a lot of musicals, but it's like one of my more nerdy like this is my one, you know. So when you asked me, you know, do you have a musical you want to talk about? I was like, well, yes, I do. Yeah, so it's really nice. It's it deals with the other main character, as it were, is Prince Digby, who is from the other kingdom. And he also loses his mother when he's younger, and he becomes the solemn prince, and he never smiles. And they kind of meet, and I don't want to spoil it, but you know, yeah, fairy tales. I mean, you can figure it out, I'm sure. It's very, it deals with sort of grief and emotions and depression and things like that in a really nice way with fairy tales and musical. I don't know, it's just really, really nice. And I think especially when I was 14 watching it, and I saw this sort of princess on stage that was like really cool, but actually having real problems as well and all that, it was just, I really, really connected to it. And in terms of the actual musical style of the piece, it doesn't really have, it's not super Broadway-y with like belting melodies that's in earworms that stick in your mind. It's one that you listen to quite a bit, and then you know, kind of, it just, I don't know, it's got into my soul, I suppose. But yeah, it doesn't have a really big, like, I know him so well, like Chess or something, but it's just the musicality of it, and it's the story flows through the narrative, and it's just really lovely. I just adore it. And it's like, if I need to calm down or something, I'll just like, I'll just put The Light Princess on. Like, it's nice. Yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Have I missed anything obvious about talking about it? I mean, no, it's just it's really good. So that's the music. Sorry. Sorry, it's like people talking to people and during COVID. I'm like, what? But anyway, so she floats, right? And on stage, the way they did that was they had 3 people dressed in black carrying her as if she was a puppet the whole time. So she's doing this incredible singing and these lovely, amazing songs while she's being carried and like floating for the whole show, which was amazing. And it was the production was directed by Marianne Elliott, who directed Company last year or the year before. You know, with Rosalie Craig, who played Althea, who was playing the lead as the female Bobby. So she's just amazing. She's incredible. But yeah, Marianne Elliott has also done Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, I think, and maybe Warhorse. I might have made that up. But she's just an amazing director that's worked a lot with and collaborated a lot with the National Theatre. And so it's one of those things, anything that she's doing, it's like, oh, I want to go see that, you know. And they have amazing puppetry as well. As I said, it's the Warhorse people, I think, that they collaborated with some birds and things like that. It was just such a good show. It was really good. And then it had a limited run. And, you know, it's like one of those, what you're talking about with Jo, being able to see the original show. And, you know, then it's just kind of gone. And you're like, is anyone going to do that again? That's really good, you know. So, yeah, that's it, really. The Light Princess. It's really good.
Fantastic, thank you. It's definitely one of the sort of. I'm a huge Tori Amos fan, but I didn't know that this musical existed until you said that you were going to nominate it. So I was like, why has no one told me about this before? So I, you know, immediately went to Spotify, and it was just like rediscovering, you know, sort of hearing Tori Amos's music, but slightly enhanced and brought to life in a very different way. Yes, clearly you're winning people over with your fact find. We'll have to have Sophia's fact finding corner to back up.
Oh gosh. But I think it was interesting because I had never listened to Tori Amos really before. I'd heard like a couple of her songs because then I listened to her. I sort of discovered The Light Princess and then listened to Tori Amos, and I was like, oh, she's really good. You know, so it's kind of the opposite to you, Dan. But yeah, I think how she writes is so fabulous, and it's just really good.
And you're right, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that sort of memorable sort of, you know, large scale chart topping couple of hits in it, but there's a sort of a real integrity to it, being a natural extension of Tori Amos's kind of musical language and her sound world and so on. So it was fascinating. So thank you, Carmen. Hoping to persuade you there to vote for The Light Princess, backed up by facts which may or may not be genuine. So Edie, let's bring you across into Speaker's Corner. So for the final time this episode, you have the floor. So again, tell us and the viewers at home what you've chosen and why you've chosen it.
Right, yeah, so my pick is Dave Malloy's Natasha, Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, which is about as massive as its title. It's a beast of a show, and it's an adaptation. Actually, it's not a original work in itself, and plot-wise, it's actually an adaptation of about 65 pages from Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which sounds horrendously dry, but I promise it's not. It's really, really fantastic, and it's huge. So Dave Malloy, who composed, directed, wrote the lyrics, wrote all of the music, and actually in the original off-Broadway run, he starred as Pierre as well. So he's very deeply involved in it, and he is incredible. He has a brain that I don't think anyone could ever really understand. It's yeah, fantastic, musical, kind of wise. The music in Great Comet is big and it's flashy. It takes this kind of aesthetic of Moscow in 1812, the sort of high society and ball gowns and parties and clubs, and brings it really, really into a more modern setting with the synthesizers. There's big kind of massive pop numbers and big orchestral numbers as well. It's everything that you could ever kind of smash into one bit of work, and it is huge. It's entirely sung through as well, so it is quite a lot to take in. I think sort of like chess, you need to be sort of paying attention and maybe reading along the lyrics as well as you go, because it is big. And I think on that, it's probably not everyone's favorite because it's a little confusing. Music-wise, it changes a lot. It goes from, you know, one number's going to be this massive, huge, synthesizers and laser beams and people doing backflips on the stage, and the next minute it's soft piano and, you know, a lonely girl on the stage just singing a little ballad, which I think just adds so much charm to it. So it originally came out in 2012, and that was the original off-Broadway cast with Dave Malloy playing Pierre, and Natasha was actually played originally by Philippa Sue, who then went on to do Hamilton. So this was kind of, it wasn't her start, but it was one of her bigger kind of beginning roles, which I think is really lovely. And then they went on to Broadway with Dave Malloy giving the role of Pierre to Josh Groban, who is just amazing. I think has the most beautiful voice. And the role of Natasha going to Danae Benton, who again I think is absolutely incredible. But I think what really kind of I think attracted me to Great Comet originally. I first listened to it, I think I must have been maybe 16, and I remember it very, very vividly. It was summertime in 2016, and I just kind of discovered it, and I was listening on Spotify, and I just played the entire thing through, and just sat there listening to it, and it was so sort of different than anything that I had heard before. It really, I think, did change how I look at musicals and music in general, because it's so strange and so out there, and yet still managed to be a big hit on Broadway, and it has the most beautiful visuals when you look at the staging. So I've never seen it live because it had a big run in Broadway, a smaller run on the West End, but it's actually left Broadway now. But it's, yeah, I think it's almost difficult to talk about it in specific because it's so huge. There's so much to it. There's only one line of spoken dialogue in the entire show that is given by, I won't go into massive detail on that because it's spoilers, but it's near the end of the show, and I think, funnily enough, it's one of the most impactful parts of the entire show, and it's the only bit that's not set to music, which is almost very sort of Dave Malloy in the way that he does things. I think as a composer as well, he's done not that many things. He's done Great Comet. He did Ghost Quartet, which a lot of people who know me will know that I really do not shut up about Great Comet and Ghost Quartet, which I think a few people, Carmen included, can probably attest to that. He's done another musical as well called Octet, which had a very short run, never on Broadway or anything, but it was a musical, which was the descriptive little subtitle. And the entire thing is completely a cappella, and it's about a support group for people addicted to technology. And it was amazing, and I think it really sort of was reminiscent of Great Comet, not at all in terms of style, but in terms of it's all very Dave Malloy, and I think that is the kind of run through between what makes Great Comet so special. I'm not sure what else I could talk for hours about Great Comet. I won't, but I could. I think that is the main things, and it's just incredible, and it's weird, and it's fun, and big, and just amazing.
Fantastic, thank you, Edie. So it sounds like we need to have another couple of episodes in which you can just simply, narrate at great length the love you have for this particular one. And it's interesting to hear that both you and Carmen were talking about how memorable it was when you first came across it, either when you went to see it or when you first heard it, and so on. And I think that's something that music does in particular, and the theatrical experience of musicals. They really do, if they're really successful, they pull you in, don't they? And they engage you, and they speak to you on a very personal level. Carmen, you were saying, I think that it was a musical where you saw someone on stage dealing with very ordinary issues and very commonplace ones, rather than just existing in this kind of fairy tale world. And that's interesting. The fact that it's about identifiable things and ideas that are very common, rather than just kind of ones that are very theatrical and. Julian was once a concert where songs dealing with taboo numbers from chess were great to sing. That's right. Yes, I mean there are some really fantastic showstoppers and some very distinctive individual pieces in that one. It's good, and obviously Lucy's beginning to be persuaded by Edie as well. So this could go down to the wire, the voting this week. You never know. So Sophie, you've been as you do each week, I know you've been listening along to all this week's choices. How was the listening experience for you this week?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, the only one out of all of these that I really knew was the Frank Sinatra, obviously. I mean, it's just the absolute quintessential album. It's really funny coming back to it and thinking about it again, because it's the progenitor of all these things, isn't it? And you forget how much it will have influenced the sound. And so when you come back to and you think about it, it's like this perfect gem. Everything hits a sweet spot, like you were saying in your introduction. And then when you realize what the production was like and how difficult and one takes and all at the same time, it just makes it slightly mind-boggling how spot on. When me and Dan were talking about it briefly earlier on, I was saying, and you can hear that, obviously, full disclosure, folks, I'm a double bass player, but you can hear the bass in there, and not only can you hear it, it's beautifully balanced in the whole sweep of the instruments. The bass line isn't dull, which is extraordinary. But just the other thing, while everybody was talking about all the albums, I just realized these 4 albums slightly split into 2 camps. You've got the kind of the opulence of the great Comet and the complexity of Chess, and they're on that kind of side of things. And then you've got the perfect little gem of the Frank Sinatra, and then the Light Princess, which when I was listening to it, obviously another full disclosure, big Tori Amos fan, not a Nutter fan, but really like her. And so I instantly loved it. But the other thing about it is there's a kind of simplicity about it that is really charming. The pared back instrumentation, which makes it feel like it's been thought about, that it would be easy for amateurs to do, it would travel well, etc., tour well, whatever. And that it almost feels, it's so fresh sounding, it almost feels like it's devised, was one of the things that kind of thought, it's a bit like, to use a bake-off metaphor, it's a pastry that's not been overworked, was what kind of came to mind. It feels really fresh and very kind of like stars align about it. There's something very lovely about it. It reminds me of a ballet that I went to see with Jo, the Alice, that they do at the Royal Ballet, with music by Jo Talbot, and everything about it is beautiful and perfect, and it just hangs together beautifully. And I've watched little bits of the Light Princess again, obviously. I was a bit of a Tori Amos fan. I went looking at videos and it just looked very, very beautiful and clean. But then, of course, I've watched videos of the Great Comet as well, and a bit of Josh Groban, and I was like, oh, wow, that's something else. They're all in amongst the audience dancing, and the orchestra's on the stage, extremely opulent. I mean, I did really enjoy it, but there were a couple of times I could have went, ooh. There was one bit where I thought there was slightly clunky lyrics marrying with tune. And what was the line I've written down? Living out the final days in Moscow, and you're like, I'm not sure, that's quite clunky. I don't know. And I just, sometimes I think, you obviously love David Malloy, but I think sometimes when there's one person is responsible for everything, it's, I don't know, sometimes can slightly, we talked about this, was it last week, when I said, it's like George Lucas doing chapter 1 of Star Wars. There was nobody there to say, yeah, you might want to rethink that and maybe prune that back or something else. And so I wonder if there's those corners in that I have my reservations to do with it being from the one mind. But it's still awesome. I was really impressed by it. I really enjoyed it, and it would be extraordinary. I'm not sure I would like to be in the audience. I'm not very good at being part of it, and I don't know, I'd be a bit kind of uncomfortable. I like to be in the, that sounds, I was about to say in the dark. That sounds a bit worrying, but you know what I mean? They were all extraordinary. I really liked all of them. Yes, so thank you, ladies.
No problem.
And you're right about the orchestration, if you like, or the chamber orchestral nature of the Tori Amos musical is that it felt very much more intimate, didn't it, compared to something like Chess or the Great Comet. There was a lovely sort of not sparse quality to it, but it felt very much more well crafted, because it felt like it was, I need to obviously go away and look up exactly what the nature of the instrumentation was exactly, but listening to it, it felt very much more intimate, as though it was written for a smaller ensemble. Is that something, Carmen, that you noticed when you went to see it live?
It was, they didn't have the orchestra, when you have the orchestra like scene, they didn't have that, but it definitely, I think something that really draws me in with The Light Princess is the fact that it does feel very intimate, because don't get me wrong, I love chess. Like when my mum was like, oh, one of Carmen's favorites, like I do love that, and I was really impressed. Edie'd been raving about Great Comet for years, and I listened to like some of the songs, but it's the first time I actually listened to all of it. You're welcome, Edie, and I was really impressed by that as well. But I don't know, I think it's I think a very organic is probably the word for The Light Princess, and how Amos goes about crafting it, and why it works so well with what she's talking about in terms of mental health and things like that in the story too. But, because Chess does have
As you know, Jo, Chess does have those two sort of barnstorming One Night in Bangkok and I Know Him So Well that were just so colossal hits in their own right and so on. And obviously having Elaine Page as the principal star at the time and so on. There's but again, listening to Chess, it feels much more musically engaging somehow than other things that I've listened to. There was a real sense of drama and the language is interesting harmonically and so on. Is that something you found when you were listening to it? It's the musical fabric of it that's quite appealing.
Yes, at the time I wasn't really that interested in whether there were hits from it or not. I just wanted to listen to the whole thing as a show. And I just loved it. I think the mix of the kind of ABBA style of the tunes and the orchestrations, plus Tim Rice's clever lyrics, which are memorable lyrics as well. I mean, some of the lines just will never leave you once you hear them. Obviously, there is a lot of exposition, but there will be in most things. But I think really it was the music and the excitement that everybody felt about ABBA doing something different that really sold the show. And I think it was a really clever move of theirs to do the album first, even though the album now, you can add things, you can add numbers, you can take away. Not all of the exposition is in the show if they did it today. Actually, there is one in Moscow at the moment, a professional production that's going on, and it won't be the same as this album, but it's just a really clever way to get publicity. If you've got an album, you get some really big hits, everybody's going, oh, well, that's really interesting, where is that from? And then you go, come and see the show. And people don't really do that now, probably because it costs too much. But back in the day, that was a really big thing, get everybody excited about the hits and then sell the show off the back of that.
That's right, yeah. And of course, Sarah, your album doesn't have that theatricality to it, not being a stage-based production or a West End or a Broadway show, but it's got a kind of theatricality about it in the way that it's, as you say, put together as an album, and the wonderful orchestral writing of Nelson Riddell. There are some, when I was listening to it anew with renewed ears after you'd suggested it, there's touches of bass clarinet in there, there's some French horn, there's some wonderful, that sheen of strings that the Nelson Riddell's orchestra creates and so on. So although it doesn't have that sort of stage-based theatricality, there's still a vividness to the orchestral sound that he conjures that I think it's a really wonderful album.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Nelson Riddell's just a genius. There's a bit in Pennies from Heaven at the end where he references it's raining, it's pouring. So he brings in little kind of. My children have this phrase Easter eggs because they see it on YouTube all the time. There are little Easter eggs dropped into all of these numbers that give it a certain sound to it. I'm interested with the other choices because I love musical theatre and I'm always interested in finding new things. So I'm very thankful for the two new choices that I haven't heard about. But it's interesting to me because it strikes me that Great Comet and The Light Princess are shows that need to be experienced. Having seen the YouTube clips of both of them, I would very much like to see them. I found the soundtrack more interesting to Great Comet. I'll be honest, because it just had much more kind of depth of different references musically. But also I've had experience of working in amateur theatre and putting shows on, and I always look at a show and I think, how can you possibly do that? How could you create something? So it strikes me that those two shows, like Princess and Great Comet, are shows that you need to experience, and they're sort of event theatre. And Chess is like an album which is looking for a production. So the others are productions that are looking to make albums of. Interestingly, Great Comet, I like little links between things. Great Comet, the Broadway cast recording is recorded on Reprise Records, which is Frank's recording company that he set up back in the 60s. So his influence is everywhere.
Yes, and that's interesting, the idea of a production looking for an album and an album looking for a production. I guess it's some things work very well as because they are created and imagined and designed as a listening package, whereas some of them are extractions from or a sort of audio part of a whole theatrical stage production. And in some ways, some of them rely on the sort of the dialogue between what you're seeing and what you're hearing to really come alive.
I have actually seen an amateur version of Chess. It's the only time I've ever seen it. It was the most hysterical evening of my life. It was just awful. And they did one night in Bangkok, which I think opens the second half. I'm not sure, but I think it does remember it. And they had one night in Bangkok with ladyboys. It must be the only time half because they had ladyboys on stage. And they had people in flip-flops doing step kick, and it was really kind of, I kept imagining to get a mouthful of a flip-flop any time, and the guy did it. So it's not a bad show to see, actually, and I think there probably a lot of amateur companies do it because of the well-known songs in it.
It sounds as though you could persuade people to vote for Chess for not necessarily the right aesthetic choices there, Sarah.
I'm just hoping that nobody I know is watching this because
that was in the
production. This episode should be called "How to Lose Friends and Influence People Away." Fantastic. Well, as we approach the end of the show, this is the point, ladies and gentlemen, viewing at home, that we need to start enthusing you to vote. I noticed that Julian has already cast his vote there. He is voting for Frank Sinatra, so there's one in the bag for Frank already. Obviously, Lucy has said she wasn't going to be voting.
Well, she probably will.
Clearly, like the ideal amateur chess.
It's obviously the zinger of a tale that Sarah's just told that got the
it was
vote.
Worth the money. It was worth every single penny.
I bet it was.
That they wanted it to be.
Yes.
Right.
I realised I never. Oh, sorry, Carmen.
Okay. Sorry, I was just going to say I'm going to have to go to my test. But this has been a fabulous chat. I love talking about musicals. But I will say, when I listened to Chess the first time, I came across the 2008 concert. And I do think it's really funny how, if we've learned anything this week, it's how good Josh Groban is at playing existential Russians. And so there we go.
He was stunning. He was stunning in Chess. He really was.
Yeah. And also, I think what you were saying about sometimes having to see a show, I do think sometimes musicals, I love musical theatre, but sometimes if I haven't seen the show, I don't think I can connect to a soundtrack because it's almost like watching a film with your eyes closed. But yeah, anyway, this has been great. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you, Carmen, and yes,
Princess, everyone.
Good luck with your test. See you later on.
Yeah, let's hope it's negative. All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye. So Lucy is here, very loyally and heroically voting for the Light Princess. So that's one in the bag. And Sophie, hopefully you're keeping a tally of these as we go along.
Yes. So I've got one for Frank, tick, and one for Light Princess.
And here we are. Alex loved all the choices, but have to vote for Great Comet.
There we go.
There's one for you. So
I've got no votes.
Oh no! So if there anyone's out there who might vote for Chess, that sounds it sounds as though Jo, yes, you need some support. We were part of the pressure group that got the album.
Well done.
Very good. Yeah.
I realised I never talked about Chess when I was just like my kind of general impressions. I wasn't really sure what to make of it. In lots of ways, it's very of its time. Yes. I mean, I wouldn't say it hasn't aged well necessarily. There's obviously some really obvious ABBA bits, having been a mega fan from the ages of 5 to 9. And then obviously that one night in Bangkok being a big, I mean, obviously the Elaine Page and Barbara Dixon, don't forget the Scott in all of this. Duet.
She wasn't in the show. She wasn't in
No, that's right. But she's on the album.
In Lincolnshire now.
Does she really? See how everything comes together.
Wheels.
Yes. which I, as a teenager, I thought was an awful song. I thought it was just such a bit of a joke, you know. But of course, we've talked many times about my too cool for school sad teenage years, but missing out on so much. Yeah, I mean, and that one night in Bangkok, I remember being flummoxed by it as a teenager. I couldn't make head nor tail of it, with that big sweeping beginning, and then it goes off into another. It's like song of two bits, and that quasi rap by Murray Head sounding like pop music by M. Do you remember that one?
Do you think that was the biggest international hit from Chess? So around the world, that was the biggest hit. Not I Know Him So Well.
Yeah, yeah. But there's one bit you
struck a chord at the time.
It's very Euro pop, isn't it? It's very Euro pop.
Yeah.
Eurovision-y sound.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know what it was about if you hadn't got a clue.
It just, as a single, how did that ever make it? You know, there's some extraordinary writing in it. There's that duet, the one you comment,
Mountain duet,
where the lyrical lines are not obvious at all, and yet they mesh together beautifully.
It's really well
slightly extraordinary. Yeah, I mean,
and I love the way that Tommy Kerberg, who was the lead, who I saw before it was Josh Groban in the concert version. I mean, he was extraordinary. He was such a good singer. And I love the way that they brought back the duet to actually end the whole piece. And actually, I've written in my notes that the reflective ending of The Great Comet, because that doesn't end on a kind of bang. It just ends on a very sort of peaceful thing about, him singing this beautiful final song. And it actually reminded me a little bit of the end of Chess, in that it isn't all wrapped up at the end. It's not all like, oh, happy ever after, they all get married and that's the end of it. In Chess, it's not like that. And I felt the same about The Great Comet. It was just really beautiful the way that they'd finished it. But it was actually really made you think about that final number. It wasn't na-na. It was just really thoughtful.
A bit like life.
Absolutely. I think that's
Maybe your life.
There's another one for Frank.
The votes have been coming in thick and fast. So there's Sarah. There's a vote from Michelle for Frank.
But
And
I
then
mean,
Carmen.
there's something about that Frank one, though. I mean, because it's just this progenitor of this massive kind of huge bit of music. It's this extraordinary, and it's like the story about when Doris Day sang "Secret Love" for the film Calamity Jane. The tale is, well, it's not a tale, it's true. The orchestra were practicing all morning for it, and then she came in to do the vocals, went into the sound booth and did it in one take. And that one that you hear, that's it. And that kind of art feels like it's often lost in modern music, isn't it? That kind of freshness, that one take feel, and also that consummate musicianship. Sometimes there are some bits that have lost as a result of things not having to mesh together in that way.
But they were live singers. I mean, they both grew up as singers with bands. They with bands, Frank and Doris. That was where they cut their teeth. So actually, a lot of their experience in doing the recordings comes from actually having to perform night after night after night.
And that's the other. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, having been accused by somebody on this panel of sounding like Doris Day when she stood next to me in choir, I'll not have a word said against her.
I love Doris Day. Was that me?
No, it was something about swooping.
Oh, hello.
Well, there's another vote in the bag for you, Edie, for Meg's voting for Great Comet.
fantastic. We love to see it. Wonderful.
And then Greg's here voting for Light Princess. Greg, were you also part of the pressure group that voted to have the album released, or did you?
Sounds like it.
But I mean, musical theatre is probably the nearest thing to that one take thing of olden days, isn't it? That because it's all sung and it's live and on stage.
And they have to perform night after night. Yeah,
That's
so
right.
it's a good mesh.
I share with Sarah the view that I had heard of the Comet. I hadn't heard of Light Princess, but I'm really grateful that I've heard the scores of both of them now, because I wouldn't have.
No.
like Sarah, I'd really like to see both shows, particularly The Great Comet, because I just can't imagine what it would be like.
Yeah.
So I'm just really grateful that I've had my eyes open to these two different shows, having thought that I knew so much about musical theatre, and clearly there's so much more to learn.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
That's right, and that's one of the pleasures of this show, is that it makes us all listen each week to the various nominations and encounter music that we might not have known before. So as we draw to a close, if viewers at home, if you've got any more votes to cast in the comments, please do. Otherwise, Sophie, how do things stand at the moment?
So we have Great Comet has 2 votes, The Light Princess has 2 votes, and Frank Sinatra has 2 votes, which makes Chess the anti-album in the same way that Ollie Double's X-Ray Specs last week was. So you're the punk album of this week, Jo Pearsall.
That's right. You win by not winning.
Yes.
It's like that episode of Doctor Who and the 5 Doctors, where it turns out that the way to win the game, is not to play or something. So there's some element of that in not winning. So does that mean we have to declare the other ones as a 3-way tie?
I'm afraid so, unless we get another one in the next few moments.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, the sort of the voting and the trophy is notionally just an excuse for us to run the show and have the opportunity to listen to some new material. Yeah. So we'll do that then. We will declare Carmen, Edie, and Sarah, your albums are a 3-way split for this week's albums of the week. So congratulations, and congratulations to Jo for having the anti-win punk album. The consolation prize. I suppose yours is the runner-up, isn't it?
I don't suppose Tim Rice and Benny and Bjorn will worry that much about it.
Yes, I can just see them weeping into their champagne buckets, you know. But it just remains to me to thank the individual members of the panel, to Carmen, who's had to dash off early, but to Jo and to Edie and to Sarah and to Sophie, as always, for being part of the panel. Thank you very much to those of you and the viewers at home for watching and for listening. We'll be back again next week with what looks to be a very interesting and another special edition of Vinyl Countdown. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back again next week. We'll see you then.